Welcome to Assault Learn and Play Part 6, Chapter 9, Movement Actions Part 1. Movement Actions Chapter 9. So, unit movement, the active player announces that they will take a movement action. Each unit will have a movement allowance from which they will spend movement points. So a unit with a movement allowance of 2 will have 2 movement points to spend. Important is the stacking limit. The stacking limit is normally 1 unit per hex. There are exceptions of the stacking limit. Infantry and artillery units be moved onto the same hex as a vehicle with the transportability in order to be loaded up. Infantry and artillery units being transported on vehicles. Units initiating a close combat. One from each faction may stack in a hex. Any special scenario rules? And you can ignore stacking limit while passing through a hex containing a friendly unit. So it's allowed to move through friendly unit hexes. So this is shown in the tabletop simulator. So for example, you can move with your rifles through friendly units. You can, of course, every vehicle with tracked movement has a transport capability. I will come to that later. Transport on the Unicode. Armored vehicles with tracked movement. These have a transport capacity of 4 strength points. For example, a rifle unit has 4 hearts, which simulates strength points. So you can transport this unit onto that vehicle. Then you have a stacking limit of 2. And another exception is truck. Truck has a transport of 8. This unit can transport a number of units up to 8. So you can put in, for example, 1 unit here and a second unit, and then you have a stacking limit of 3. For close combat, it's clear if this unit moves into close combat, you have a stacking limit of 2. Coming to normal movement. So normal movement, unit activated can move up to the number of the base allowance. So it's a normal action. So, and the terrain costs are important to see how far you can go with your unit. So if we take a look, I want to take this rifle unit now and I want to march along the road. I have to check the movement allowance, which is stated on the unit card on the upper right corner. This unit has 2 points for movement allowance, and you see the movement type. It is infantry with a feet symbol. For example, you have a tank. Tank has 3 movement allowance, and you see the tracked symbol for tracked movement. You see here a truck. He has 6 movement allowance, and he has a wheel symbol, so wheeled movement. And you see a anti-tank gun, which has 1 movement allowance, and you see an artillery symbol for artillery movement. And I want to move along this road, so I have to check the terrain chart, and I see on the back side of the terrain chart you see a main road identified, second row from above, second line from above, and you see in the middle movement cost for each movement type. And you see the movement type symbol, and we take the yellow one, the infantry symbol, and you see 1 hex costs 1 movement allowance. So now I have to activate my unit with a normal action, because I do a normal action, and I can count up 2 hex to move. I have to pay my movement allowance points every time I move into a new hex. So I have 1 and 2, and that's it. My rifles are standing here at the end of the turn. If you do this with a vehicle, you have of course activate. I want to move with my Panzer 3J. I have to activate. I have a movement allowance of 3, and I will check again on the road. I have a tracked movement, and I have asterisk. The asterisk say for the main road, no movement cost for changing direction. So this is something special for vehicles which have this green, or if they are in half strength, red triangular or arrow. It symbolizes that this unit has to be aligned to the hex vertex. So I have learned I have 3 movement allowance, so I can now count up 1, 2 and 3. And the special is with vehicle which are aligned to hex vertex. So a vehicle can change direction after each step for 1 hex vertex free. Yeah, even and I'm on the road now, so on the road we learned from the asterisk comment, it's free to change direction. So I can move 2, I can 3, and I can decide to move my direction as I want, because it does not cost any movement points. So if we would like to move on an open ground, on a clear terrain, we can check the terrain. It's 1 for tracked movement type. So I have, again, if I move forward, 1, 2, 3. But now it's important to know, on a clear terrain it's not free to change facing. It's only free for vehicles, as a vehicle specific rule, to change it by 1 vertex free. If I want to change it again, I have to count 1 movement, 1 free vertex change, a second movement, 1 vertex change, a third movement, 1 free facing change. If I want to go here, it costs 4 points, so I'm not allowed. So I can only change 1 change facing to a hex vertex free after a movement with a vehicle. Okay, this so far for normal action. Fast movement. So in a fast movement, a unit may move normal movement allowance plus 1 additional movement point. After movement is completed, a fast action status marker is placed. Important for this rule is of course infantry units. When do a fast action, they lose their weakest defense die when get fired on. So this is important for infantry because the soldiers try to get in a quick manner through the terrain and do not think a lot about defense. So they're running over the terrain. Same as with artillery. If they are allowed to do a fast action, most artillery units are not allowed to do, but if, same thing, they can earn 1 more point movement allowance, but they have a disadvantage in defending. And vehicles can do fast action, of course, but they gain a defense die because they're a point target and harder to hit if they move fast when you fire on. A difference between vehicles and infantry units is infantry unit can only do 1 fast action in 1 turn, and in the next turn they are not allowed to do again a fast action because of they are somehow exhausted. Unlike vehicles, vehicles can do every turn a fast action. Okay, if we decide now to perform a fast action, it looks like this. I want to take this unit into this forest. I will mark it here. and I have to count my movement. I need to go inside this forest, and I can check the terrain chart. Clear is 1 point for movement, so I have 1, 2 here, and then my movement allowance is done. To enter in the light forest, I do need again a 1, so 1 point, so I do need 1, 2, 3. To achieve this now, I can raise my movement allowance by 1 using a fast action. So I activate my unit, and I can raise from 2 to 3, and so I can move 1, 2 and 3 into this light forest. But as I said before, infantry gets weaker in defense while doing a fast action. Same principle for vehicles. I want to go with my Panzer 3J. I have normally 3 movement allowance, but I want to go a little bit further. I have to do a fast action, and I can move 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have reached my target hex. So if I want to move my artillery or my anti-tank gun, I have to take into account the special abilities and attributes. I see here a slow and a heavy weight, and I flip the card to check slow. This unit cannot use fast action, so with this unit I'm not allowed to perform a fast action. So as you have seen, I can use fast action to raise up my movement speed by 1. Yes, then I have again a third movement type, and it's a combination of moving and firing. I can use move and fire action, or I can flip it to fire and move action, and that is easy to play. If I make a move and fire action, I'm allowed to move and then to fire, or vice versa, first fire and then to move. Artillery units are not allowed to move and fire, or fire and move. And if I do such kind of action, I'm losing time with moving and firing, or firing and moving. So this simulates the time a unit needs to go into position and then firing, and a defender gets therefore a defense bonus. And how does this work? So I can decide, for example, I have my rifles up here, and I have an enemy unit on the road here, and I have here no clean line of sight because of the light forest and the building here. I decide to raise my accuracy, so I can decide to make a move and fire action. I mark this. Move and fire means that I get movement allowance. I halve my movement allowance, rounded up. If I have like the tank 3, so I divide it by 2, so I have 1 movement allowance for the infantry, and after this spending 1 movement allowance, for example moving into the light forest, I can do a fire action on this enemy unit. So you can use of course first fire and then a move to avoid getting shot with a clear line of sight. So this tank wants to fire on this anti-tank gun. He uses first fire action, and then he is allowed to move reverse. Reverse is movement allowance halved. We have with the tank here 3 movement allowance, halved, rounded up, so I have 2 for reverse movement, and this again will be halved because I make a reverse move and fire action. So I have 1 point left to move reverse. I can first shot fire on the 37mm ADG, and then I can perform a move action, and this is then better for the tank because he has now cover from the building inside the line of sight, which gives defense modification. So this was an example how you can use move and fire. So next rule we want to show is the harsh terrain. So a hex contains, so if a hex contains a terrain movement cost that exceeds the base movement allowance of a unit as stated on the unit's card, the unit must always treat it as harsh terrain. So a unit cannot use the extra movement point allowed by fast action to avoid treading a hex as harsh terrain. So a unit cannot use the extra movement points allowed by command cards. So harsh terrain is harsh terrain. If an terrain entry point value exceeds the movement allowance on the unit card, then it's counted as harsh terrain. To enter harsh terrain hex, a unit must begin adjacent to the harsh terrain hex and may move a maximum of 1 hex. Then it's marked with delayed action. So as an example, I put this 37mm ADG gun on the hillside, and I wanted to move this ADG gun into the heavy forest here, which is a good cover terrain for this gun. But I have to check the terrain just first, and the heavy forest says for artillery movement 2 points to enter this hex. I have to check my movement allowance on the card. I have 1 point, and so I'm allowed to move in, but then this heavy forest is counted to harsh terrain because it exceeds the entry point value, exceeds the movement allowance on the unit cards. So I move in here, but then this unit is getting marked with a delayed action. This means it takes a longer time to get into the terrain and get into position. If you take a look to the organization phase, after the game turn, yellow markers are flipped and you see the effect for the next round. This unit has to wait the whole next round and is to be still in movement for the next turn. So if you do a delayed action by entering harsh terrain, be aware that your unit is stuck into normal action for the whole next game turn. So that is a disadvantage to get into such kind of terrain. Okay, this was the first part of movement actions. The next part is dealing with special terrain types.